Hi everyone, I'm Dr. Judy Morgan, and today I want to tell you the story of George. My daughter wanted to adopt a Cavalier King Charles Spaniel when she was about 12 or 13 years old. Through a series of events, we were able to rescue one from a puppy mill hoarding situation. Delilah came to live with us, and she was the most amazing dog ever. I love that dog so much that I wanted one of my own, because Gwen wasn't sharing. So I ended up adopting Laura Lou, who was an English toy spaniel, very similar to the Cavaliers, and Jasmine. They came together. Over the years, as dogs came and went, it was time to get another English toy spaniel after I lost Laura and Jazzy. And so I went to the rescue group, Lucky Star Cavalier Rescue, because they had English toys quite often as well. On their website, I saw a picture of Paul and George, two black and tan English toy spaniels, little tiny guys, little 10-pounders. Paul was adorable. George could have been adorable, but his eyes were crusted and gooey. It said right on there that he had a very bad case of dry eye, and he would need to be on eye drops, which were fairly expensive, every day for the rest of his life. Paul got adopted immediately. George stayed in foster care for 9 months. So these two were rescued from a West Virginia puppy mill. And the owner of that puppy mill actually was one of the top English toy spaniel show owners and breeders for many years and had champion lines. Something happened, he lost his mind, started a puppy mill, way too many dogs, got closed down. And so George was having a hard time getting adopted because of his dry eye. And this was very early in my career of holistic integration into my veterinary practice. And I looked at George and I thought, I bet I can do something with that. So we agreed to adopt George, and we drove to Indiana. Not only did we come home with George, we came home with Shayna and Pookie as well, two Cavalier King Charles Spaniels, because why not? Little George with his dry eyes was just the sweetest, happiest, most wonderful dog, but he did require drops put into his eyes almost every couple of hours. So this was my challenge. How could I fix George's dry eye? At that point, I was pretty early in my career of studying food therapy. But I thought, well, let's break this down. He's got a lot of phlegm crusting his eyes. He's got a yin and blood deficiency because he doesn't have enough moisture. So what if I designed a diet for George that would dissolve phlegm and would be yin tonic and blood tonic? And I did. And so that was the first version of the dry eye diet. There's been many versions throughout the years. Within 3 months, George was off all eye medications, and he was making tears beautifully. And so now I had a healthy, happy little boy who just required good food and didn't require expensive medications and me putting drops in his eyes every couple of hours. George came to teach me that. I always say that every animal that comes to me for a reason, and that reason is to teach me something that I didn't know before. George, along his career path, taught me a lot about things that I didn't know before. I wish that he didn't have to teach me so many things, but he was a great little teacher. George was so personable. Everybody wanted George. He was my mom's favorite. Of all our 13 dogs at the time, George was everybody's favorite because he was just a happy little guy, and he just brought smiles wherever he went. So I started writing my books, and we started going to pet expos to talk about holistic medicine, to showcase my books, to showcase food therapy. And George and his little girlfriend, Pookie, who was a Blenheim Cavalier, Pookie's on the front of a couple of books as well, they were awesome going to these events. And they would sit in our booth in their little chef's outfits on a table, and they would just pose day after day and just had a ball. They had their pictures taken with so many kids, so many people who just thought that they were adorable. They were on the red carpet in New York City at a film festival. These dogs were just amazing. And when we started Breakfast with Spaniels, George and Pookie were always front and center with the rest of the crowd. When George turned about 15, I started noticing some things that I wasn't happy about. His tongue took on that brick red, what I call toxic red color. And for those who follow me and know anything about tcvm, we use the color, shape, size, and coatings on the tongue to give us a lot of information about what's going on. And when we see that brick red, toxic red tongue, that tells us there's something bad going on. There's a lot of heat inside that body. And George was drinking more than normal. So I had lab work run. Everything was normal. No problems. Okay. Then I had some urine run, and it showed a bunch of white blood cells, but the pH was low. And so, of course, the veterinarian wanted to put him on antibiotics, and I said, no, he doesn't have an infection. There's no bacteria. His pH is too low, but we have white cells. My brain said, something's going on here, something sinister, and I based it on his tongue. Everything else is perfectly normal. Eating, playing, acting normal. I decided we're going to go get an ultrasound. Got an abdominal ultrasound, and George had 5 tumors in his bladder. Well, that was pretty devastating. Not surgically repairable. They usually aren't. And so we did testing, and it came back as transitional cell carcinoma. No shock. They usually have 1 tumor, not 5. George, always an overachiever, had to have 5. Everything else looked pretty good. He had a heart murmur. No big deal. I am not a huge fan of chemo, radiation. I'm not a fan of slash and burn. I'm a fan of healing the body, allowing the body to heal itself, and using all the tools in my toolbox. So of course, what do? I come to the warehouse and I go up and down the aisles and I start picking all the things that could help George's cancer at least stabilize, not progress. I didn't really have hopes of curing it, but I wanted to hold it steady. In my practice, the longest I ever had a client with a dog with transitional cell carcinoma survive was about 2.5 years. And that particular dog did have chemo, radiation, diet changes, and supplements. So I thought, well, there's my goal right there, but I'm not going to include that chemo part. I added in probably 18 different supplements. Luckily, George was a foodaholic. His favorite thing was to clean up everybody else's platters and lick the floor where anybody might have dropped something. And so he didn't care how many supplements, how many tinctures, how many mushroom powders, how many different herbs I put in his food. He was all in. The interesting thing was, as soon as I started all of that and I changed his diet recipe a little bit to support him for the cancer, his tongue went back to normal color. A toxic red tongue. It's looking better, actually. I also ran the VDI test to predict cancer, and it came back as no chance this dog is going to get cancer. And I called them up and I said, hey, my dog has cancer, and this test says no chance he's going to get cancer because they're looking at inflammatory markers. And what they told me was, your protocol is working so well that the inflammation is nil, and he's doing great. And I thought, well, yay! This is like a gold star on our report card. So about a year and a half in, I said, you know what? I'm gonna go get another ultrasound. I wanna see what's going on in there. And so we went, and one of the reasons I went is George was starting to lose a little bit of weight. He wasn't absorbing his food as well, and we were having to give him a lot more food to keep his weight even. So I knew we had some stuff going on in his bowel where he just wasn't digesting as well. So that's a spleen chi deficiency for the tcvm people. So we went and had the ultrasound done, and the great news was that his 5 tumors were now 3, and the 3 that he had were smaller. because one of the things we worry about with this particular cancer is, can we keep the dog urinating? Is there a chance that one of those tumors will grow and obstruct the outflow tract and they won't be able to urinate? So this is great news. I didn't have to worry about that. Fast forward another 6 months. So we're about 2 years in, a little over 2 years, and his tongue went to red. And then he started walking away from his food with all the supplements. So I said, all right, well, we know we get to this when we have cancers. We have to pick and choose. First, I took everything away just to make him eat. Then I started adding one supplement at a time. Some of them he would tolerate, others he would say, nope. So if he said nope, that one was off the plate. And so we got it down to about 3 that he would tolerate. And they kept things at bay. We were doing really, really well. On a Thursday in September, he refused his food completely. Ate great the day before, but refused to eat. And I thought, okay, maybe he's just got a little upset stomach. Friday, refused again. Had lab work run, didn't get the results till Monday, and on Saturday, he passed peacefully in our arms at home. And he was 17. Now, I don't know about anybody else, but to have a dog have a 17-year lifespan, to cope with 5 tumors for 2 years and be happy, playful, great little guy, and then slide over the bridge very peacefully. None of us could ask for anything better than that. Like I said, George is an overachiever, and I was really lucky. And he and I had a conversation the first Thursday when he didn't eat. I held him in my arms and I said, George, it's okay. We're okay. If it's time for you to go, you can do that. I am going to ask, would you be so kind as to just go to sleep and not wake up? And please don't make me have to make this decision. And he did. Again, he always did what he was asked to do. Great little guy. Now, am I sad that I lost George? You betcha, because he was great, and I miss him every day. Do I have any regrets? None. Not a one. Because he had an amazing life. He had more experiences. Every day was a new beginning, new fun, new adventures. He traveled all over. He's been to Canada. He traveled all the states with us in our motorhome, went to so many expos, and he taught so many people. And he taught new dogs that we brought into the house. So, gosh, what a celebration of life. This is not something for me to grieve over. This is a celebration. And I also know that I will see George again. He will be in a very, very large pack of animals running toward me at that time, but it's okay. He'll probably be at the front because, like I said, he's an overachiever. So how do we deal with grief? I mean, not all of us are so fortunate to have an animal that decides to just pass peacefully and make it easy for us. It's not always easy. And sometimes we have to make hard decisions. Pookie's passing was totally different from George's, and I held on to so much grief and so much guilt over Pookie's passing. She was a victim of veterinary malpractice. I couldn't get rid of that. Very different from losing George, who had a full, wonderful life. Pookie's was cut short. I don't know if I will ever forgive the people who did the wrong things with her, but I have to forgive myself, and I have to know that Pookie still passed in her own way, in her own time. One of the things that I discovered, and I actually accidentally discovered it, I was talking to my therapist about PTSD from a car accident. I brought up Pookie's name, and she said, wait, back up. Your whole demeanor just changed when you mentioned Pookie's name. And I said, what do you mean? And then I burst into tears. And she said, what is that about? And I told her that I had guilt and that I was still grieving. And this is many years later. And so she told me to write a letter to Pookie and tell her how much I loved her and how sorry I was and that I need to get over it. And I did. I have the journal. The letter is 3 words. well, it's 5. Dear Pookie, I love you. And that was all it took. And then I got to have that cry that I never had. I got to release the emotions that had been stuck inside for so long. Now, some people, it might be a 10-page letter, but one of the things that we have that you can download are grief exercises. And I worked through this with my therapist, and let me tell you, it can make all the difference in the world. If you are stuck in that grief, I will tell you, your pet does not want you to be stuck in grief. Laura Lou passed tragically when I lost her, and a communicator, we had Pookie and George with us on the red carpet in New York, and I sat down to talk to a communicator, and she looked at my husband and I and said, "You don't want to talk about these 2 dogs, do you? You have a lot of guilt over another dog that you lost." And of course, Hugh and I burst into tears, and nobody said a name, and we all knew that we were talking about Laura Lou. And what the communicator said to me is, Laura is stuck, and she cannot move on because you are stuck in guilt. You need to give that up. Same thing I had to do with Pookie. You need to give that up. You did everything right. You have taken the best care of your pets that you know how to do. And I want all of you to take this to heart. You are doing your best. You do your best for them. It doesn't always work out the way we want it to, but if we hold on to guilt and grief, we're holding that on them. And they want us to be happy. They want us to celebrate their life. They want us to remember them with joy, not with tears and sadness and grief. So I strongly recommend download the grief exercises if you have an animal that you are just still holding, that you cannot get over. You'll feel so much better. And then when you think about them, you'll be able to think of them in happy terms. You'll be able to see them running and playing and being the best selves that they can be. For those of you who want to learn more about palliative care and hospice care, which George was in palliative care for 2 years with his cancer. I was not trying to cure his cancer. I was trying to hold it at bay, keep him happy, doing his best for as long as possible. His hospice care actually was that last 2 days. That was when hospice kicked in. Up until that point, 2 years of palliative care, and we only needed 2 days of hospice care. So we have the hospice course. You can get certification in hospice and palliative care, or you can just learn more about palliative care for your pets, including food therapy and natural treatments. I hope this helps some of you. I know that I have held on to grief for very long periods of time when I didn't need to. And it's so much better when you can remember them with joy in your heart and with a smile. And just imagine yourself hugging them and running with them and playing with them, because that's what they want you to think of.